One question that let's see, Philip has posed, which I think is a good one maybe to talk about at this point. Can you guys talk about the order that you took the exams in and why? And maybe let's see, Jennifer, I'll go ahead and sort of start with you. Can you talk about the order that you proceeded with?
Sure. So, I mean, first I talked with people who were taking the exams, got their opinions, and figuring out which ones were the overlap. Like site planning and PP&P, there's overlap, and then building design construction and the systems. I don't remember exactly, but I grouped it, kind of three, and three clumps, whichever the major ones are that everyone, kind of goes with, and that's how I ended up like attacking them. So I've started with the building design construction systems, and then went into the MEP one, like went towards those first, thinking like those would be like the hardest challenges for me. So that's what I started with. And then I did the site planning and more like vignette and schematic ones towards the end, thinking those would be like more easy or less difficult towards the end. That's how I approached it.
How about you, Josh?
Okay, so I actually started with CDNS and then structural systems and BDCS, BS, PPP, SPD, and SD. That's the order I took them. So the idea definitely is I saved schematic design for last because at that point I knew I wasn't going to really want to study. So I decided that one has the least amount, is mostly mostly just a vignette. So I just went ahead and put that as last, and I think for that one I actually practiced vignette very, very little. So kind of a bad example there. So make sure you practice a vignette. But my idea was really to get some of the harder ones out of the way first, like structural systems and building systems. I do remember walking out of building systems thinking I had failed it, but luckily I did not. And as far as starting with CDNS first, I think I was just really comfortable with construction documents at that point, although I did need to do a lot of studying specifically on the contract side of things for that one. And in structural systems, I was also familiar with as well because I had been a TA in a structural systems class for 3 years while I was at school as well.
Okay, and how about you, Charlie?
I basically went through, as I was kind of starting from scratch, I went through a bunch of different blogs and, just sort of asked friends in the building who had gone through it what their advice was. I think I ultimately ended up borrowing the most from a blog called Young Architect, Mike Rosica out in Portland or somewhere in the Northwest. So I ended up doing, I knew I wanted to cluster CDS, PPP, and SPD in a row, so that was kind of a block, and I knew I'd have a weekend in the middle. So I ended up doing BS, BDCS, and structures the first week, then had a weekend to sort of recalibrate, and then CDS, PPP, SPD, and finished it out with schematic design. That was most places I read suggested doing SD last. I actually put it last because I was the least confident in it. It's the most subjective, and when I did the first couple of times I did practice vignettes for SD, I wasn't going to look at the clock and just did it until it was done, and totally missed the whole don't try to do good design, just try to solve the problem thing, and I ended up spending like 3 times as much time as I was supposed to on those, so I was terrified about ending with SD. But it was nice to get kind of BS and BDCS out of the way early, finish that first little run with structures, which I was reasonably confident in, but also knew could be terrifying. And then diving into that second week with the 3 that I thought, or that I had read, had the most overlap or the most continuity between them, CDS, PPP, and SPD. And I thought it was, again, because they were all back-to-back, I knew the order didn't matter a whole lot because there wasn't going to be a huge difference. But actually, something I didn't really think about until after I scheduled them and realized I had done accidentally was the timing of them in terms of how long the exam is, how many questions versus how much time for the vignettes. Again, because I was doing them back to back, I had a really good rhythm of sort of long, short, long.
Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't. I don't know if I would have thought about that. In general, people ask me all the time about what the order should be, and the answer is always just do them. Like any order is going to be a good order, but there are some logical groupings, and I think you guys all sort of talked about them. Some are very specific to the moment right now, which at the juncture between the 4.1 and 5, there's a few that sort of slide easily back and forth, CDNS, PPP, and site planning. For example, as a group, if you get those done now, you can easily slide that over into the 5.0 if for some reason you decide not to finish up in the 4s and you want to do it under 5. So there's some reasons to get those done early. The other thing I always say is somebody, I can't remember who was talking about it, but somebody mentioned the kind of weirdness about going on your first time. I guess Charlie, maybe it was you, talking about the metal detector and the all the kind of craziness, and I'm sure it's different at different locations, but it's a very alien experience to go into one of these testing centers, and none of the people there know or care anything about architecture. It's a testing center. The person next to you could be testing on being a private detective or a beautician or something. So it's a very alien, strange place, and you're not allowed to bring anything in, and it's sort of funny. Some places won't even let you bring a code in, and so just choosing one as a starting one that you feel is the most comfortable possible, and that way going in to start, you're not as worried. You're starting with one that you feel comfortable with. I think that's really one of the keys as well. But then also, as Jennifer said, there's a few that have sort of logical overlays, and it's probably smart to do those together, like systems and building systems.